All right, so next we have our guest speaker, Brother Abdullah Andalusi, or Ustad Abdullah Andalusi. I try to call him Sheikh, but he doesn't like it, so I'll call him Ustad Abdullah Andalusi. Is an international speaker, thinker, intellectual activist for Islam and Muslim affairs. His work involves explaining and demonstrating by rational argument intellectual proofs for the Islamic belief system and promoting the Islamic way of life and Islamic solutions for contemporary problems. Abdullah has delivered talks internationally on the question of the purpose of life, the existence of God, and the miracle of the Quran, the superiority of Sharia as a social, political, and Islamic economics as well. Furthermore, Abdullah has given extensive talks and written articles rationally critiquing secularism, liberalism, secular democracy, and materialism. So, pretty popular guy. Atheism and secular humanism. He has spoken at community centers, universities, colleges, and has numerous appearances on various programs on TV channels, including BBC, ITV, BBC Arabic, BBC Radio 4, Al Jazeera, Press TV, Islam Channel, Iqra TV, and more. He has also engaged in a number of debates with atheists, secularists, agnostic, liberals, Christians, on a number of topics from theology to political philosophy. 2009, he co-founded the Public Discussion Forum, the Muslim Debate Initiative, a forum that promotes open dialogue and critical debate between thinkers, academics, political and public speakers of all backgrounds. Alhamdulillah, second time I think he's hosting him here in the GTA, and he'll be speaking at other locations for the next 3 days. I know he's tired, he was jet lagged today. May Allah bless him. He's excited to be with all of us and share, alhamdulillah, his expertise with all of us. So without further ado, barakallahu feekum, Shaykh Abdullah. Or Ustad Abdullah.
Before I start off, I just want to say that I am ecstatic to be here. I've only been here in Toronto once 2 years ago, but I've met so many brothers and made so many new friends that I kind of consider this a homecoming to see family. And I want to give also a big thanks to I3 and the two dear brothers here for inviting me. And I think the best reward they can have given me is to give me the chance to see you and see them. And I think I prize nothing higher above that. So I'm really grateful, and I look forward to kind of seeing you more over the next couple of days, both formally and informally, and so on. So please don't be a stranger and approach me whenever you want. So for this lecture is about doubts concerning or in an era of individualism. And when you hear these big words, individualism, most people switch off. Even people that follow the creed switch off. They don't really know exactly what that kind of means. They think it means something to do with just being an individual, but isn't that just obvious? They would say, like, aren't we all individuals in a way? Aren't we just all like separate human beings, so to speak? So what's all this individualism, and why are you concerned about all this doubts in an era of individualism? What do you have to hide, or what are you scared of by having such concerns? But of course, most people who hold this belief don't actually understand individualism, even if they follow it themselves. But they all give you the same kind of responses and answers when you ask them, what is the purpose of life? And you ask them, they say, well, I don't know what purpose of life you might mean, but I'm just here to enjoy myself. So that's one. They'll say, if you ask them about what they do in society, what their work they're doing in society, they'll say, well, it's great to help other people, and that's really good, but first and foremost, I'm here to do me, and then other people can do themselves, do you, as they say. And yeah, it'd be great. It's not that it's bad to help other people, and they might be very helpful for other people, but primarily they say that their lives are their own business, and other people's lives are other people's business, and no one should tell them how to live, what to do, and so on, even though they might watch TV programs that tell them how to live, and commercials that tell them what to buy, including fashions that say buy this fashion, or buy this electronic equipment. It gives you freedom. It gives you be unique and buy these sneakers or what have you, even though these are mass-produced items that thousands of other people are going to be buying and wearing. But somehow you're unique for buying these things. These things represent your uniqueness. So this idea that we must be ourselves, or authentically ourselves, and we must live free. And you think, free from what? Like, are you trying to escape slavery? Is someone trying to enslave you into chains? What do you mean you're trying to live free in your life? Because you're not free to not pay taxes, so you have to pay taxes. You can't escape. If you have to make money, you can't escape being told what to do by a boss, or trying to please clients by giving them what they want and what they demand. If you don't please clients, then they don't give you their money, and you kind of starve. So you're always trying to serve other people's expectations of yourself. So I don't know what you're free from exactly. You're not free from adverts or commercials unless you switch off your TV and you stay in the house, because they're everywhere, telling you what to buy, telling you how to live your life. So I don't know what they mean by that. But we're not going to talk too much about how their aqidah of individualism contradicts human nature. We're not going to talk about that today so much. That's for maybe a different discussion, maybe over the coming week. Today we're going to talk about how individualism will cause shubahat, or doubts. And not just doubts amongst Muslims, but doubts amongst religious Christians, religious Jews, many people who follow the Abrahamic faiths, and even people who don't follow the Abrahamic faiths. Individualism causes doubt amongst them. And why is that? Well, let's talk about the aqidah of individualism. And just so you know, just so you understand what I mean by terms here. So individualism, it's in aqidah. When applied politically, it's called liberalism. And the economic system, based on the aqidah of individualism, is called capitalism. See, so those are how it links. So all these things, they come from an aqidah, and the aqidah is individualism. So now what do I mean by that? Mashallah, Sheikh Oster went through some discussions on that, and so did Sheikh Salah. So these things have already been kind of discussed. So I'm going to try to present it to you in a kind of formula as the founding fathers of individualism came up with. So John Locke, Hugo Grotius, and Thomas Hobbes. So basically, in about the 17th century, so about the 1600s, I'm not going to get into why this came about. That's a different discussion. But a bunch of thinkers didn't trust religion anymore to be the basis for government, because they thought it was causing too much instability. So they tried to think of a different way to create a government system not based on religion, not based on basically Christianity in essence. So they came up with an idea of that let's study human beings and find out, they studied the universe, and they're coming up with ideas of the natural laws of the universe, right? So they thought, let's study human beings and come up with an understanding of what is the natural laws for human beings. So did they put human beings in any experimentation? Did they use a scientific method? Did they do experiments and studies? Nope. They just started to develop their imaginations to say, I wonder what is the natural law for human beings? And they came up with a theory. And the theory is, before people came into society, what were human beings doing? Maybe human beings were just like wandering around by themselves in nature, through the forests and through the prairies, all by themselves as individual humans running around. But because that situation was not stable, because human beings could fight each other, and a strong human would bully a weaker human, they kind of came together and created a government or a society by which they could have a law that would defend themselves from strong individuals from bullying weaker individuals. And they believed in this kind of primeval state, that these individuals just walking around, that they basically had no interaction with each other, they didn't care about each other, they were in a state of pure freedom from any other human being. And then you said, well, then how did they even have children? Like, how did they even exist if they were all individuals, right? Like, what about families, right? And they said, maybe that's what happened was you'd have a woman and a man wandering around as individuals, and then they just bump into each other, and then basically the man would get the woman pregnant, and then the man would leave, and the woman would then leave pregnant, and then basically the woman, after she delivers a child and the child becomes an adult, the adult then separates from his mother and becomes an individual and just walks around. So it's all this, it's like you know how marbles are like, you know, flowing around in a plate, well, even then they bump into each other, but they imagine that humans were like these marbles just like running around and not having any contact with each other. Despite the fact that any anthropologist, any historian will tell you that there's never been any time in human history where this model could ever possibly exist or happen, it's ridiculous, because humans form families, they come from families, they form tribes for mutual protection. There was never any time humans popped out of existence as just a bunch of individuals, and then later on said, hey, you know what, let's just get together and be society. So these people, Hugo Grotius and John Locke and others, they came up with this idea, and they said this was a scientific idea, even though not based on any experiments at all whatsoever. It's purely just imagination from their heads. And then Hugo Grotius, when he discussed natural law, he said that this natural law, he believed what made it a natural law is that this law would exist even if God didn't exist. And that's an important thing to remember. Do you know why? Because that means that this conclusion they came up with, they believe to be more superior than God, because it doesn't require God to exist, to be a law, to be what they thought was how things are in the universe. And of course, John Locke then came in and made some other points. He said, if you are all individuals, then you have absolute sovereign control over yourself, as in you are the owner of yourself. You own yourself. You are the sovereign, you're the highest lord of yourself. No one else can be a lord of yourself, or nothing else can be greater than yourself. You are the highest lord of yourself. You control yourself and you own yourself. Even though you didn't create yourself. Did you create yourself to own yourself? No. You didn't make yourself. And even if you said, okay, you could say you came from your parents. Okay, but do you have a bill of sale where you bought yourself from your parents, or did your parents say, we give ownership of you back to you? Because some ancient societies believe that the parents own their children because they created their children. But even then, we don't believe that, of course. But you didn't make yourself. So how do you actually own yourself? You didn't buy yourself from something else. So where's your bill of sale to say, I own me? You don't. You say, but I can control myself, so doesn't that mean I own it? Well, if I can get a rental car and control where I drive it and smash it into things, but it doesn't mean I own it, and it doesn't mean that I'm not going to be charged for it afterwards. Just because I can control it doesn't mean I own it. Oh, so does that mean then you could then put chains on a person and lock him in your basement, and if the police come and you say, no, I own the person because I control them. I've got them under control. And say, no, you don't own that person. Or let's say, in case you get a smart aleck atheist, say, well, you don't actually control their movements. So say, okay, let's say you put a gun to someone's head and say, do what I say, and they're scared enough to obey you and move when you tell them to move and not move when you don't tell them to move. Can you say you own them then? No one would ever say that. It's ridiculous. So basically, the Aqeedah of individualism, it believes everyone owns themselves, absolutely nothing beyond that. Nothing else owns the body. You own it. Nothing higher than you owns your body. 2, what is the purpose of individuals then? What are they here to do? Well, they argue that John Locke and Thomas Hobbes argued, these are classical scholars of the West, in the West. They argued that humans have a desire. They have desires. They want to do things. They want to eat when they're hungry, and they want to chase after men or women, right? Where they have that desire, right? Or they want to basically have wealth or build houses for themselves, or if you're ancient humans, like have a nice cave, right? They have these desires. So then they came up with the idea. They said, what is happiness? How do you define happiness? And they came to the conclusion that happiness is the constant satisfaction of your desires. You eat, and you fill yourself to your belly, and then once you do that, that's maintaining happiness. And even if you're kind of full and you're not really hungry, but the food is tasty, and you kind of have a bit of you're kind of like, oh, it's a really like nice sugary donut from Tim Hortons, right? I'll have another one. I don't need it, but I'll have another one, right? They'll say that's you maintaining your happiness. Keep feeding yourself, keep looking for pleasures, going to playing games or chasing after people or what have you. All this is you being happy. That's definition. Constantly satisfying what you want to do at any moment in time. And even notice in the adverts, remember the adverts, they sell things to you by pointing to the Aqidah, saying, because you are all individualists, and by this product, it will help you achieve what your purpose of individuals are. If they say, act on impulse, just do it. You know, like the Nike sneakers, just do it. Where does that come from? The Aqidah. It comes from the Aqidah of individualism. They said it to you saying, you can fulfill yourself as an individual by buying these sneakers, or buying these shirts, or buying what have you. Okay, pursuit of happiness. And just so you know, an interesting little quirk on things, John Locke was very influential to the Americans. Right? They based their Declaration of Independence on John Locke's teachings and the Constitution as well. And they said that these things we held to be self-evident, that all men were created equal, obviously apart from the slaves that they were owning at the time, the ones who wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. But anyway, it's a different discussion. And they also said that all people should be free to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they got that from John Locke's original statement that people should pursue life, liberty, and material things. But they thought, doesn't sound romantic. Let's change the material things to just happiness. But that's pretty much what they meant. Pretty much what they meant. Okay, that's so you own yourselves, and your purpose of life is the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so then how do people do transactions? How do people allow other people to touch them or what have you? They say you can only ever interact with any other person's body or their property, which they also own, by their consent. You need their permission, you need their consent. Because they own their body and they own their property, so you can only touch their property or their body by their consent. And you might say, well, and it's actually a small point, but it's actually interesting. Or how comes they can tax me without my consent, right? Well, they can tax you without your consent because anyone, when the people vote in elections, that's considered giving your consent to the government. The reason why the politicians want you to vote, they don't care who you vote for, they want you to keep voting, is because you vote and that gives legitimacy to the government to actually charge you taxes. And you think, where'd you get that from? Well, not only did John Locke say it, and not only did Thomas Hobbes kind of discuss something similar, but why do you think the Americans rose up against the British in the first place? Why? No taxation without representation. What they meant by that is the Americans couldn't elect any MPs into the British Parliament. What they first wanted was MPs in the British Parliament, right? That's what they first wanted. And if Britain had given it, they probably wouldn't have rebelled. They probably, more or less anyway, probably. So, because they didn't have a chance to vote, they said it's not fair for you to tax us then. So, next time you grumble about taxes, just reconsider whether you should continue voting or not to keep legitimacy. I mean, they'll still charge you taxes, but if everyone didn't vote in the next elections, the government could find it hard to justify its own existence, and that's why they're very scared about that. So they need to have you voting, and they love it when there's two candidates that are so different that makes you want to vote, because that gets majority of people voting. They like that. Anyway, that's a bit of a segue there. All right, so people own themselves. Pursuit of happiness or pleasure is the purpose of individuals. Things are only right or wrong by consent. And the fourth one is that because this comes by natural law, as they say, they believe this is the highest principle. So individualism is higher than anything, because as Hugo Grotius said, it's natural law is such that if God didn't exist, it would still be true. Which means he's arguing it's higher than God. You might think, okay, that's interesting to know about the Aqeedah of individualism. How does it relate to doubts about Islam, about religion? How does it relate to it? Well, you've probably been asked this question yourself. They say, you're Muslim, right? I say, yes. Explain me to something. Why do you have a problem with people having relations outside marriage if they consent to it? And I mean, they might say, what's your problem with people of the same sex having relations outside marriage? But generally speaking, they could argue more broadly, anyone having relations outside marriage, right? Why is that wrong? If they consent, they own their body, they consent to it, so it's not harming each other, harm being violating someone's body without their consent, so there's no problem. So why is that wrong? And many Muslims don't know how to argue. They say, oh, it causes STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, it doesn't have a responsibility if there's kids. And they say this, and then they might say, well, look, there are people who, you might find people out there who don't have STDs, and they check themselves before engaging in a relationship, and they intend to stay with each other for the rest of their lives. So what's wrong with that then? Then it becomes a bit difficult to respond, because you're trying to argue that it's not beneficial for individuals to do it. But by arguing it's not beneficial, firstly, it's not only is that not the reason why it's prohibited in Islam, but also is that, well, not beneficial in this life, if you from that perspective. But also, you're actually kind of agreeing with the individualist, the Aqeedah, because you're saying that, okay, it's what you're saying, you got a point, but the reason why we don't like it is because it causes harms to individuals' bodies, or it causes people to be not getting pleasure, which is part of the Aqeedah of individualism, right? Harm to people's bodies, as in STDs. Sexually transmitted disease is a harm, right, to a body. So, and making people sad because you're not showing responsibility or looking after the kids, that's considered to be against the pursuit of happiness. So you're actually arguing within the Aqeedah. It's like, just so you understand what I'm saying by this, it's like, imagine you were in the time of the Quraysh before Medina, before Yathrib became Medina. So at the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, and the Quraysh were coming to you and saying, like, why do you Muslims, you were complaining to the Quraysh saying, why are you persecuting the Muslims? And the Quraysh were saying, well, what's wrong with persecuting Muslims? And you say, oh, well, Hubal wouldn't be happy with you for doing this. It's like, well, you don't believe in Hubal. Why are you using that as a basis to argue for your rights? You say, Hubal gives us our right to be Muslim. The Quraysh would be amused by it because you don't believe in Hubal. So why are you using that as your Aqeedah to argue for your rights in this? That's not how Muslims should argue. And that's going to give Muslims doubts. Why does Allah prohibit this then? Why does Allah prohibit people from making consensual choices then? It's a tough one. I mean, it's not the toughest of all. I've got other ones, but that's just to start off, right? Well, here's an argument. Here is the real response. Okay, you say it's wrong to do something to a body without the consent of the owner of the body, right? And they say, yeah. I think some of you might see where I'm going with this. Who owns your body? Who owns the heavens and the earth and every single atom in it? Who owns it? Who owns everything? Allah owns it. And has the owner of the body given consent for you to use his property that he made and he's constantly sustaining it? If he stopped sustaining you, you'd pop out of existence. Right? You know the idea of amana? Like if someone gives you something as a trust, you can't misuse it. Right? So Allah hasn't given you ownership of the body, He's given you control of the body. Like a rental car, as an amana. So has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala given you the consent to misuse His property, to have in relations outside of marriage, or relations outside of marriage, full stop. Whether it's same sex or other sex, just full stop, relations outside of marriage. And they say, and then they won't know what to say to you, the individualists, because if they don't believe in God, that's fine, but they can't say, you don't have a basis for this. And as a Muslim, this is our basis. Allah owns your body, He doesn't give consent for it, because that's not what He intended His property to be used by. It's not in the way of the fitrah that He intended us to kind of the natural way of us to exist and live. You know what the Sharia means? Linguistically, it means a way, a pathway. It was used by Arabs to say pathway to water, like a Sharia. Pathway to where you have somewhere you can drink and sustain yourself. It's a path. It's a path that represents our natural law, the law that Allah intended for us by our fitrah. So this is how you defeat that doubt. But don't accept their Aqidah. That's what causes you to doubt. And we're going to go on other stuff. What about, here's one. They say, God gives you free will, right? I said, yeah. So we have freedom to choose. Everyone has freedom to choose. And you might say, everyone has freedom to choose. Okay. So then why does He punish people for making choices? Isn't that not fair? Just because you choose something that he doesn't like, why does He punish you? Why does He punish you? That's not fair. If you're not harming anybody, if you're not harming anyone, why is He punishing you? Well, simple reason. You see, in the Aqidah of individualism, because they believe that you own yourself completely, they've made God to be just like another individual, someone else who's interfering in your life by telling you what to do. And likewise, if your neighbor tells you to, let's say you have a neighbor and your neighbor says to you, that red jumper you're wearing, I hate it, don't wear it anymore. And then next day you continue wearing it because you think, why's my neighbor telling me this? And then you're still wearing a red jumper, and then your neighbor basically punches you for wearing a red jumper that he didn't like. You say, how dare you punish me? It's not your business to tell me what to do. That's exactly how the individualist would see God. He's another individual. I'm my own individual. Why is He interfering in my business? Telling me what to do if I'm not harming anyone. Oh, they don't mind God punishing people for harming other people because they say, human judges do that. In the courts, in the police. Oh, they don't mind that. But if God is punishing you for doing sins or not worshipping Him, they say, why is it God's business to demand people worship Him? Right? He even doesn't need it. So why is it His business to ask you to worship Him, and then He punishes you for not worshipping Him? That's not His business. Because they treat God like He's a neighbor. They don't treat God like God is the one who owns you. He's sustaining you, and He created you for a purpose, and that good and bad isn't about consent. Good and bad is whether you are following the purpose He created for us or not. And I explain that. If you have a car, I know everyone here drives lots of cars around in these big wide open roads, not so much in London, there's too much traffic, so people just take public transport. But if you have a car, right, what's the purpose of a car? Can anyone tell me? What's its purpose? Take you from point A to point B. Okay, good. So if you have a car that can take you from point A to point B, is it a good or bad car? Okay, it's a good car. I mean, there can always be things that are better, but let's say it's a good car. Let's say you have a car that has no engine and no wheels. Is it a good or bad car? Sorry? You don't think it's a car at that point? Yes, a good point. But is it a good or bad car? Let's say it has wheels but no engine. Or let's say it has an engine but it's broken. It's a bad car. Why is it a bad car? Yeah. It's not fulfilling the purpose. That's what good and bad means. You're good if you're fulfilling the intention or the purpose that the creator of the entire universe intended for you. And you're bad if you don't fulfill the intention that he created for you. Your purpose as a created thing, like the car is a created thing. So that's what good and bad is. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is when he created everything. Creation itself is a manifestation of God's power. Your existence is an ayat of Allah. Your existence is a proof of Him. There is nothing else. We have no other purpose other than to be an ayat of Allah. You have no other purpose than to be something that glorifies God and proves or manifests His ability to create. You bear witness, your body bears witness to God's existence. So if you then choose with your free will not to bear witness to God's existence, then this is a very big crime. And he has full right to demand this because, well, He made you, He created you, and He's currently sustaining you and everything else for that purpose. There is no other conceivable purpose that we could ever have, ever. Then they say, okay, why does suffering exist or evil? Why does evil exist? And many Muslims have doubts about. They say, oh look, there are children that die young, there are good people that get persecuted by tyrants and dictators. People get tortured. People have diseases that gives them lots of pain. And even they'll say, look in the animal kingdom, right? There are like a lot of suffering sometimes happens with animals eating other animals, or chicks being born and tumbling from the nest. What did they do to deserve that? Why is God punishing them? That's not fair. And why do they say that? They say it because of the aqidah of individualism that says your purpose is to pursue happiness, meaning pursue pleasure. So if they say, okay, we can accept that God exists, yeah, we can accept that. John Locke was a Christian, right? I mean, it's strange, funny to believe that, but yeah, it's funny that that's even the case, but yeah, he was a Christian. But they say, okay, God made everything, and we now believe that our purpose is to pursue happiness and pleasure. So then why is God making a universe whereby we don't always have pleasure, and in many cases we have pain? That's not fair. That's not fair based on what we think our purpose is, which is the pursuit of pleasure. And then it causes doubts. And when Muslims try to say, oh, well, we need pain and suffering as a test to make choices. But they'll just respond to you saying, okay, but why does God make a universe that even needs tests of suffering and pain when our purpose is to pursue pleasure? Because again, if you accept the Aqidah without thinking about it, they'll always win in the argument. Don't subconsciously accept their Aqidah. Don't do it. Start with your Aqidah first. And just say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made creatures to move and desire to change and work with using pain and pleasure. Both have to be there to motivate you. Like, a car engine, right? It needs to have fuel to make it go. It needs to have fuel, and it needs to have a spark plug to create the ignition. It needs those two things. We need pain and we need pleasure to motivate us. Everything in this universe does. But Allah is merciful. If Allah was evil, as they try to say, as they try to make it out, then why is it that plants don't feel pain? He could make plants feel pain, which have no reason, no purpose for it. Doesn't. Every creature only feels the amount of pain, because not every creature has the same kind of nerve system that we do. Like insects and bugs and things like this. Every of these creatures only feel the certain amount of pain they require to motivate them in their own world, in their own situation. They don't need, they don't have the same nervous system as we do. They don't feel the same amount of pain. Like a cricket doesn't have the same nervous system as a human or a donkey or an animal. But ultimately, pleasure and pain is to motivate creatures to move in worship to Him, to live as ayat of Allah, as a manifestation of God. And pain and pleasure, you see, if we only experience pleasure or if animals only experience pleasure, they would never know how much they depend on God and how limited they are. But because everything, animals and humans, we experience pain, we see in this universe, we feel and experience that we are limited things. We are not gods. And every animal will bear witness that they were limited, and every human will bear witness in their judgment and that we are limited because we couldn't stop certain pains and we couldn't gain certain pleasures. But you need to have both as part of our existence, because both pain and pleasure bear witness to Allah. Pleasure bears witness to Allah's mercy, and pain bears witness to our limitations as created things. That's the Islamic response to them. Don't accept their Aqidah. And I think the last point I'll kind of raise up, I'll make a point on this, is they'll say, why does it have to be Islam? Why one religion? Why not other religions? Why can't people just choose whatever religion they want? Why does God punish you if you're in the wrong religion? That's not fair. You're meant to have free choice, they say. Yeah? Again, from the argument that human beings own themselves, and they should and what makes something good is they give a consent, as in choice, to do something. So if they want to be a Hindu, then why they should be punished for being Hindu? Because they chose and they consented to it. Why be a Muslim? It should be allowed if they consent to it, and that's what makes it good. Not that if it's true or not. Just what makes it good is that they chose it and they consent to it. What makes it good to be a Christian, what makes it good to be any kind or a polytheist or what have you, is their choice. So they view it as injustice to be punished for making a choice about what religion you're in. And some people who try to be like liberal Muslims who just fully adopted the Aqidah of individualism and just retain the label Muslim, they say, yeah, it's okay, all paths go to God. Say what? So even a Satanist, that goes to God? Or someone who believes in multiple gods? Because that's a whole bunch of paths there. If you believe in like a whole number of Zeus and Thor or something, that's a path to God too? No, there's truth and falsehood. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us to bear witness to the truth. What does it say in the Quran? He made the universe bil-haq, in truth. If you don't follow truth, you are rejecting Allah and you are rejecting everything that He made. I mean, sure, if you're following the wrong religion because you didn't know any better, you're in Amazon rainforest and you tried to search for the truth and you are Hanif, rightly inclined, then it's not your fault. You tried your best. The truth wasn't shown to you. You can't be punished if the full truth wasn't shown to you. But even many of the Hunafa, and I'm referring to those who are Hanif, or the rightly guided, they'll be judged whether they believed in one God above everything, or they worshipped humans or creatures or things, because that you should be able to tell with your mind. You don't need the revelation to say that's right or wrong. You should be able to tell that with yourself, with your mind. Because you're here to be a witness to the truth, and if you're not, then you're going against your purpose, and that's bad from the Islamic perspective. You have a purpose, you don't fulfill your purpose, that's bad. Not choice, oh, my free choice makes it good. Nope. If you choose falsehood, that's bad. If you choose it deliberately, or you choose it not caring whether it's false or true, that's bad. So, this Aqidah of individualism. From this Aqidah springs all the doubts about Islam, about religion, because the Muslims who hear it, who grew up in the West and even in the Muslim world after colonialism, they have unwittingly and subconsciously adopted the Aqidah of individualism, and they try to defend Islam using the Aqidah of individualism. You might as well try to defend Islam saying that Hubal supports it. All right? That's how ridiculous it is. So, in essence, brothers, if you want to maintain your faith and you want to justify and show your faith to be true in an era of individualism, don't follow what everyone else is doing and adopt the Aqidah of individualism. Adopt the Aqidah of Islam, and you'll find that it stands on the strongest of supports. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله العظيم.
Jazakallah khairan. That was deep stuff, mashallah. All right, let's take some time, inshallah. Not too long. Sheikh has to eat and sleep. We do too, but blaming the Sheikh. Let's take some time for a question and answer. We don't have hundreds of people here, so I think just raise your hand. I'll select the person, inshallah. If I'll try to repeat the question so everybody can hear it, and then if you have somebody specific you want to answer,
brothers and sister,
then name them, inshallah. If not, then I'll move to either. We'll go brother and sister and back and forth, inshallah.
Brother Abdullah was talking about the state of nature, Thomas Hobbes. And what's interesting to me is that the state of nature has an assumption that humans are evil and self-interested. And that this is an idea that's in Christianity, that human nature is essentially evil. And similarly, that that human nature, the agency of the human being, should rule over all. That should be the rule and not the exception. The agency of the human being, nothing should get in the way of it. That kind of goes back to the idea of God or that the human being made in the image of God. So my question is, in what ways do these Enlightenment values, in what ways do individualism go back to, I guess, Occidental Christian doctrine? Because it's not pure reason. A lot of this is kind of a succession to certain Christian ideas, Christian doctrines. So are there any examples or other ideas that are inherited?
Okay.
can you repeat the question very briefly?
Okay. I'm going to give you a brief answer. There's a big debate as to how these Enlightenment values, when we mean by Enlightenment, it's just a period of time in European history where liberalism was invented. They call it the Enlightenment, not to be confused with the Renaissance, which was a technological development in Europe 600 years prior to the Enlightenment, or at least before it was realized in politics. Okay, so Christianity believed that human beings were irredeemable and evil. They were not prone to sin, and they can only be redeemed by God rescuing them. It's not a Jewish idea. It's not an Islamic idea. But that they needed Jesus to die for their sins in order to be redeemed, and the original sin of Adam alayhi salam forgiven amongst humans. They believe that everyone shares the same sin of Adam, so you're born with the sin of Adam alayhi salam. Something that's not a Jewish doctrine, it's not an Islamic doctrine, and maybe some Christians even dispute that, but they're a tiny minority and they're called heretics. But Thomas Hobbes actually didn't depend on Christianity to get his idea. He just viewed that humans needed government, because without government they would be in a state of nature, just fighting each other like animals would. And so we need government to basically stop us from fighting and killing each other and living short lives because of that. Like how gangsters and gang warfare. They say gangsters don't last long because they live in a circumstance of chaos and anarchy. So that's where he came up with the idea. John Locke actually strangely argued the opposite, and people reckon Thomas Hobbes was an atheist, but John Locke was the one who argued. He was a Christian, but he argued that the opposite in a way. He didn't say that humans are naturally evil. He just said that as individuals in this state of nature in some distant past that never really existed. But anyway, in this distant past, humans just had disputes and squabbles because they couldn't agree. If you're arguing with your neighbor, you might not see eye to eye. You need a judge to help you, a mediator. So for the purposes of having a mediator, and just kind of restoring justice in case you have an argument, people set up government. As to how that was linked to Christianity, Allahu Alam, maybe people say that Christianity had been using the fact that humans were evil and they needed religion to save them, that those who wanted to have a government without religion kind of left that behind and went the other direction and said, no, humans are not necessarily evil, they deserve freedom and not to be under the control of a priesthood caste. So anyway, but that's something we can explore. And as I said, we're still researching as to how did Christianity have any influence in the Enlightenment values? Was it fully a result of materialists creating it, or anyway? That's a interesting discussion, but I want to give people not all the chances. But yeah, interesting discussion. So is it one sister and then one brother?
Yeah, from the sister side.
No one's on. No, there hasn't raised any hands up.
So, question, Barakallah fikum, Jazakumullah khairan. Assuming that individualism has become more popular in recent times, and in previous times, the main goal of life was just to survive. Since that's changed now, we have a lot more technological advances, we have a lot more we can do. Do you think that has increased the just naturally made us more individualistic?
So basically, has this appear that individualism is increasing, and is it partly due to technological advances as well? Right?
Okay. Okay, so it's an interesting question. Has technology made us more individualistic? I would say it could be argued in different ways. If we had a society whereby you had a family being the center of that society, people really wouldn't have enough time to kind of run to their rooms and go on computers and things like that. People would eat together. You notice that in certain before even people had smartphones, and before Facebook, and before even the internet, right? Teenagers being raised on this aqidah would go to their room and eat, and not eat with the family. They'd watch TV, and even if you didn't have a TV, they'd read magazines or things like that. They'd read. Even before internet, before even they didn't have a TV in their house. People would want to do their own thing. But as time goes on, people want to. The technology was invented, and it was sold to people as something that could make you better individual, as in more independent by yourself. So now you can control when you talk to people. You don't have to have people decide when they can talk to you by coming up to you and say, hey, you've got 5 minutes, can I talk? And it's got to the point now, you see, with the telephone, when you had the telephone before the smartphone, the telephone that was in your house, when people called it, you picked it up. When people called it, you picked it up. Who's calling and what's it about, right? But with smartphones, have you noticed now, that same feature, the same call function feature, you can be called, and if you don't want to pick it up, you don't want to pick it. You don't want to pick it up. And even now they say, "Oh, don't call. Send a message instead." Because why? That gives that person the freedom to respond back to you when they feel like it. So but as I said, maybe it's a question that maybe academics might debate, because they might say, was it the technology that's accelerating individualism, or if we lived in a society with a completely different culture, would we use our technologies in a different way? Would we be more individualistic? I think that there are many brothers I know who are very strong family men, spend lots of time with their kids, lots of time with their family, and they have smartphones. Don't think that's made them more individualistic. But in some ways, you could say you can tell by the adab and akhlaq of a person. So some kids, they'll meet up. Let's all meet up. And I've seen them all around the dinner table or coffee table, and they've all got their phones tapping away. I even heard of an apocryphal story that in one case they were talking to each other via their phones. Don't know if that's true, but it would be a funny joke. So that's an interesting question. Maybe that people could debate it in different ways, and maybe might say, well, maybe it has some effect, but I think if you lived in a different culture, people would use the technology in a different way. Remember, technology isn't attached to culture. It's not attached to culture. People say that the availability of spirits, the high alcohol content drinks, causes a binge drinking culture. right? Causes binge drinking culture, right? And England is famous for that. Work hard, play harder, right? Binge drinking culture. But if you look in France, which has spirits, you can buy in the same shops. They drink wine and they don't engage in the same kind of binge drinking. I mean, yeah, they get drunk or what have you, but not the binge drinking where, you know, people can go to hospital just because they've drank too much alcohol. And that very night, not overstudied liver damage, which happens cumulatively, but that one night they overdose on alcohol, basically, right? So France, they have the same access to the drink of spirits, but their culture makes their approach to it differently. So does our culture affect how we use the products? I mean, Allahu Alam, I'd like to think that there's evidence to show that it does, and that we might have used it differently if our culture was different. So,
I guess what I was trying to get at more was that, you know, in olden days, people's main goal was to survive, right? And just not to die, okay? So individualism wasn't really a choice back then. But now, since we have a lot more comfortable lives, we can be individuals.
Yep.
oh, okay. So the brother is saying that in the olden times, people were just focused on trying to survive, and so maybe they couldn't be individualistic. But now we have so much comforts and modern conveniences that maybe this allows us to be more individualistic now than before. Well, what I would say is, I mean, look, what are people using this technology for, right? They're using it to communicate with each other, just not in person. But back in the medieval times, there's still social networks. They were just in-person social networks. Instead of people posting gossip on their page, they would just make gossip by their tongues, and that would spread via the people talking to each other. So humans are always social. But the thing is that we use this technology now to try to control when people come to us to ask to be social. If that makes sense. So you say, you know what, I don't want to talk to people right now, or I don't want to actually have to kind of like sit down, listen to someone in a coffee shop, or like look interested, or maybe I haven't done up my face, and if you're a woman, or maybe I'm just in my PJs as a guy and I don't want to dress or whatever. I don't want to meet people, but I still want to talk to people. So they'll still be posting stuff and talking to people online. They're still talking to people, but they just don't want to. They just find it convenient to maybe talk to people they want to talk to, and if people they don't want to talk to come, they can just choose to ignore them for a bit, right? Or ignore them completely. So that's how it's made you individual, because they said, isn't it like pressuring your freedom if you're forced to talk to people because they come up to you and you want to be impolite about it? Well, social media, all this stuff offers you a way to, and smartphones offers you a way to kind of like ignore people for a bit because you're an individual and you should have some freedom. You should have more freedom. That's how they sell it. Understand? So, and besides, people still like, we're still kind of worried about not dying and things like that. But the point of talking to people was, hi, how are you? Why? It's like, do you need something? They ask, how are you? Are you sick? That's where we need each other, right? That's why, and we still use it to this day. So what you're saying is an interesting point. I will say that my last kind of response to you in this is that maybe there is a genuine point to make with village life and city life. Even in the medieval times. In a village life, it was a small village, everyone knows each other, you can't do anything without everyone knowing about it. You know, everyone speaks, you can't go out without talking to anyone. But in a city, you had a bit more, like, you know, you didn't know everyone in the city, it was too big, but you might know your neighborhood, right? You might know of your neighborhood, but you don't know everyone in the city. And so you could basically live a little bit more separate or isolated a little bit from everyone compared to if you live in a village. Maybe that was true, but that was true back in the medieval times as well as now. So anyway, so I think that time doesn't change anything. Humans are always the same. But this aqidah of individualism, this has made something, a new circumstance, a new situation.
Maybe I can comment a little bit myself. So I guess from my perspective, the last few years in the States at least, the statistics of people living with their families have increased. And that's because of the economic situation. Let's say a couple of decades ago, most youth basically, at least after graduating from university or even after leaving high school, they would leave their parents, go get some loans, get a university degree, and get a job, and really just like leave their family's nest since then, and totally live on their own, pure individualistic life. And I do agree with you. Basically, I think changes in the economic situation, the ability of the individual to survive on his own, does impact the behavior that results from individualism. But I do like to basically also separate that individualism and ideology. So, like prior societies before the intellectual revolution in Europe, were not individualistic in terms of their aqidah. Lots of societies, for example, in Arabia, was tribalistic in nature. Southeast Asia and China and Asia Pacific world, it's very, very family-oriented conservative societies. So that would basically, first of all, the idea itself basically impacted people. But what I'd like to basically add here is that the economic situation allowed people to really live it to the max within a specific period of time. And right now it seems basically things are reversing, and you have more kids basically staying with their parents until they're 25 and even a little bit more. And now living with their parents basically doesn't come as free, so they're not going to be as individualistic as they can, because they feel that somebody's taking care of them and they need to give back and so forth. So that does basically kind of lessen at least what I call the individualistic behavior of people. So I do agree with you from that perspective. And in technology in specific, I personally see that the phone, it does basically keep people away. But I'm not sure if I would call this individualistic behavior. I think this just keeps people busy. When a husband goes and works for 12 hours a day, he's not individualistic. He's just basically busy with being able to get things done. And using a phone could be because of individualism, because you don't care about nobody else, but just basically that you're trying to get certain things done and you're just busy to get that task done. So it also separates technology and wouldn't basically generalize. So from a technological perspective, as I said, basically it depends on the reason of your behavior. Number two, economic situation and the social structure basically does impact individualistic behavior. And the society's pre and post basically intellectual revolution in Europe, due to individualism, secular capitalism, or liberal capitalism, basically does have a huge impact on the individual. There's one more? Or
So,
I think it's
the sister.
And that's it.
one sister question, and we're gonna wrap it up there. You can speak to the sheikh, but we do need to run out of this building by 10. Just respecting the management and to shut down and give them that time as well. So we'll take the question from the sisters.
My question is to Brother Abdullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome together. The question is the speed of individualism. Is it inversely proportional with the aqidah of controlling of your nafs in Islam? This is my question number one. And what do you suggest the solution to constantly keep reviving the aqidah of Muslims, Islam, in an individual? Because sometimes consciously or subconsciously we tend to convince ourselves that this is our right and we have a right to be happy, even though we know that our happiness and our pains are already decided and we have to do with others. So what do you suggest that youngsters, what is the good strategy to keep reminding them that this is how you should see and keep themselves eradicated from the aqidah of the
Okay. So I'll repeat the question in reverse order. So the sister was saying, in this kind of era of individualism, how can we educate kids so that they don't fall into this creed, and how can we show Muslims an alternative? How can in what approach can we do to revive the Islamic creed? How do we keep reviving it in order that it keeps that the younger generation can not fall foul of individualism? And her first point is individualism disproportionate or inversely proportionate to kind of the someone whose ability to control their nafs, their desires? So, well, first and foremost, one of the things I think is miraculous about the Quran is that it could have It could talk about one reality that was at the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ with a form of words. And then thousands of years later, in a different reality, those words still make sense and give really good guidance. So when it says, when it says in the Quran, have you not seen the one who's made their desires, their Rabb, their Lord, right? Referring to someone who they reject the truth about Islam because they've chosen their desires over choosing the truth. But now, 1,400 years in the future, individualism is quite literally making a person's desires actually into their God. Be an authentic you. Authentic what? What's authentic about you? What is even you? What your combination of DNA, your parents raising you and inculcating you certain desires and tastes, random things that happen to you in your life, and of course the culture that was around you and the language that you were taught. All these things are external things making you and building you up, things that came into you, so to speak. But there's nothing. What's intrinsically you? What's super unique about yourself? But individualism, I actually call individualism the Tawheed of liberalism or the West. It's their Tawheed, because we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unique. There's nothing like unto him. He's independent. Nothing controls him. And that he is infinitely creative. He can create. He has infinite power to create whatever he wants. And there was nothing that came before him. And he actually has true free will. True free will. Why? Because he doesn't depend on being given choices or tests to make a choice. Our free will, we depend on imtihan, right? We depend on tests. The whole point of tests is to allow you to make a choice. If God didn't test you, you wouldn't be able to manifest free will. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can create things without any choices being given to him or any waiting to be in any circumstance or situation. He just creates, he doesn't even need to have enough to give him desires. He doesn't have enough that gives him desires that he has to then follow those desires. No, he literally just wills it straight with no nature that pre-exists his will. True free will. God truly has free will. But guess what? How we describe Al-Ahad, the one, individualism describes people or individuals. The human has infinite creative potential. You are independent, self-sufficient. Be self-sufficient, isn't it? They always tell you, be self-sufficient. You're self-sufficient. Well, Allah's only self-sufficient. Isn't it funny? The Quran talks about this Qurayshi guy who's arrogant, who's arrogant because he believed he was self-sufficient. He rejected the truth because he believed he was self-sufficient. This is where his kufr comes from, arrogance. Arrogance. So before, the Quran was talking about people who made their desires into their Lord because they just chose their desires over following the truth. But that verse, I think, who's revealed to us by the one who created both the past and the present and the future, knowing everything that's going to happen. I like to think in Allah's hikmah, but Allah knows best, obviously, the meaning of his verses. But I like to think that it talks about those who literally created a religion based on making their desires their Lord. Literally declaring it now their Lord. Be impulsive. Just do it. So, I don't think it's inversely proportional to controlling your nafs because they don't believe that, okay, maybe you could say it's true, they don't believe in controlling your nafs, they believe in following your nafs, whatever it says.
No, from a Muslim perspective, from
Yeah.
a Muslim point of view, because if a Muslim is able to control Islam, as you said, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that, have you seen a person who worships his nafs, who follows his nafs to the extent that he prefers his own nafs over the hukm of Allah. So in that sense, I'm saying that for a Muslim, controlling his nafs and individualism are these inversely related to each other.
Oh, okay. So, so from the Muslim perspective, in essence, you can't control the whisperings of your nafs. I was actually talking to a brother on the way here about this. And we know from, I believe, from a hadith where the Rasulullah was talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that Allah will forgive what your nafs, the whispers of your nafs, as long as you don't act on it, right? Because your nafs is always going to whisper. You can't stop it from whispering and telling you desires, from giving you motivations. You can't stop it. You don't have no choice about it. What you can do is not act on it, avoid situations that cause it to whisper it louder, and try to find situations by which you can train your nafs to whisper different things, good things instead of bad things. Right, so training, but that's that point. As to your second point, which is now just kind of, sorry, my jet lag has now made me forget it. The second point after that was
the tarbiyah, the kids basically.
Oh yeah, the children. Yes. How do we kind of train our children to kind of like not follow their nafs and the wrong things, and not be individualistic, but act correctly? Well, do you know what a famous Western philosopher said? Recent one kind of said that you can't basically escape suffering, but kind of getting happiness is just understanding why you're suffering or what you're trying to achieve. Basically, purpose. Right? You have to give the children purpose. If you don't give them purpose, you're just telling them to live their lives, and all that's left is their nafs talking to them and telling them all kinds of things and being manipulated by adverts and society, because all that society, all that culture and adverts and all these commercials and all these teachings that they get from their school tell them it's to manipulate them and their nafs to whisper certain things, bad things. But if you don't give them an alternative, then of course they're going to follow that. And what I mean by an alternative is, because they're living in the West, right? You have to give them a vision beyond the West. If you tell them that their purpose of life is just to rise up in society and be respected in society, then they're going to think about how to do that in a society where the culture is based on individualism. But if you tell them there is an Islamic world project that the Rasulullah ﷺ started and that all Muslims have to strive towards, which is bearing witnesses to mankind that there is only one God, and this God is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That there should be justice between mankind, and that there should be mercy and compassion between mankind, and we should use the guidance of the Quran and the Sunnah to realize this. And I'm not just talking to Muslims, but also that non-Muslims should be living under justice and should be living under compassion and mercy, and that the animals should be well treated, and that we should ban this kind of cattle farming, and that causes suffering to cattle, this mass-produced capitalist-based kind of farming, this global warming and the destruction of the environment. We need to protect the world as the aman of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to establish a civilization that bears witness to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His justice, His wahi, and that gives us a way of life that fulfills our fitrah, our natural purpose, and that bears witness to non-Muslims seeing us as a people who are content fulfilling ourselves with the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His law and His commands. Give that vision to your children, and they won't deviate. They'll think, now I have a goal. And it doesn't mean ignore being in society or like give up going to university. No, they're gonna start striving. They're gonna start developing themselves. They're gonna start maybe getting very good jobs, because they can use that money and they can use their knowledge and they can use their networks and connections to try to bring about the world that the Rasulullah sallam envisioned and taught us about, which is a world where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the highest, and the worship of Allah is the highest, and the highest reference point and criteria for all mankind. Give that to your children, and they won't be diverted and swayed away.
Can I comment on that, inshallah?
Yes.
Just a last comment on the same question myself. I guess it seems the question came from a concerned mother, because she does have several children. Is that correct, sister? How many mothers do we have over there? Can you put your hands up very quickly? MashaAllah, we have several. How many fathers do we have here? Okay, so we have several here. The question of raising children is one of the most difficult. Okay, alhamdulillah, I have a few children myself, and I can tell you it's a challenge. So there is an Islamic secret recipe for this. Okay, now unfortunately it's not being implemented in many families, and I think we want to help out the families to implement the Islamic divine recipe for tarbiyah of children. This needs a real practical project. I know people know me here. I don't like to talk. I like to get things done. So if people are really serious about it, I can tell you what the recipe is in terms of the title of the recipe. But what I'd like the sisters, specifically, since they're the one who asked, to promise that they're going to start a group of specifically mothers that come and execute the strategy and train other mothers in the city, because everybody needs this. Are you willing to do so? So I can tell you the recipe, or no? Put your hands up. I want to say, I want to hear yes. Are we up for this task? Sisters, I didn't hear much yes. Are we going to do this? Yes or no? Yes. Brothers, fathers, are we going to do this? Yes or no? Okay, the secret recipe, really, there's few things, but the most important of all of them is something called, one word, it's called stories. Okay, now I'm not going to basically tell you more. It's just one word I'm going to give you today. There's way more to explain this in details from a psychological perspective and from an Islamic Sharia perspective. But since people basically did declare yes, we might start basically with a lecture after I come back from, inshallah, from our trip to Halifax. We have a trip that we're taking the I3 team to Halifax to train the city in da'wah and Islam, and maybe inshallah establishing a YD in Halifax, Nova Scotia, this coming Thursday, bidnillah ta'ala. After we come back, Allah bless you, the sisters need to make the effort to set up a lecture specifically for young mothers and mothers basically to be, and fathers to be, so we can discuss the usul al-tarbiyah, the fundamentals of Islamic tarbiyah of children, and give a roadmap so you guys can implement it on a weekly or bi-weekly basis within the community. This masjid, inshallah, can host such a session, and this session is very, very needed if we do it the right way. Barakallah fikum. I'm going to give the mic, inshallah, to Shaykh Rasul so we can finalize. This is the last moments of this lecture today.
Barakallah fikum. Jazakallah for coming. May Allah bless Ustad Abdullah Andalusi, Shaykh Ustad, for their remarks and their insights. Alhamdulillah.